good morning. In compliance with the notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law, under COVID-19 emergency declaration, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the city planning department conducts its meeting according to Robert's Rule of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Abstentions from every vote due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting have the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raise hand feature before asking a question or making a comment, if in fact you are on the virtual interface. The raise hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking on the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. Chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. Calling users can unmute by using *6. We will ensure that there is an opportunity for public comment. We have a place on our website that allows for the public to make comments. And we will also take a small portion of the meeting to field questions from the chat and from public comment. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube. We have provided a link to the meeting for those who wish to speak on a particular matter, particular case via our website and email. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. Mr. Chairman, the meeting is yours.
Thank you. Michael, call the roll, please. Bowen. Present. I'm David Bowen. Downey.
Present.
Okay, my name is August. Okay.
Grace Scott.
Hi, I'm Dr. Denise McCray Scott, newest member.
Oh, welcome.
No, I do not see her.
Fine. Present. Councilman Charles Slade. The first is a special presentation.
Microphone.
The first is a special presentation, vision for the valley. All the people that are going to speak to this, so I can swear you in. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth as you shall answer under the penalty of perjury. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, and then August.
I must recuse myself, Mr. Chair. So therefore I will not comment, make recommendations relative to this.
Okay, thank you. Who's going to start with us?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Brett Collier, Director of City Planning. I'm going to start the presentation. But before I do, I just want to acknowledge all of our partners that are here. This project is extremely important and is part of a strategic effort to regenerate the urban core. When we first initiated this project, we wanted to really focus on our waterfronts, not just our 8 miles of Lake Erie waterfront, but we also wanted to focus on the Cuyahoga River Valley. In 2014, the administration and the Metro Parks partnered to host a boat tour where the CEO of the Metro Parks and Jackson hosted a tour to navigate the Cuyahoga River Valley and also look at our waterfront. City Planning Commission, in partnership with the individuals that you see here today, begin to really start to look at the Cuyahoga River Valley, given the fact that there was so much emphasis being placed on the 8 mile stretch of waterfront that is our Lake Erie shoreline. The River Valley creates a true opportunity to really leverage significant investments. And I'm going to allow for a number of our partners to come up and really give you a brief synopsis of why this project is important to their organization. So first, I'm going to call up Mr. Sean McDermott from the Cleveland Metro Parks.
Commissioners, Sean McDermott, Chief Planning and Design Officer, Cleveland Metro Parks. And just thrilled, honestly, to be here this morning. Be here as partner, be here as advocate, and to be here to be able to take the first step, the next step, which is execution, by piece of all of the elements laid out in the plan. Good plan is one we know when we feel it. We feel that this plan can achieve that incredible balance valley we all need to achieve between public access, industry, green space, environment, development. We look at this as a partnership, not only a partnership with the city of Cleveland, for Cleveland, Fast Forward, and LACA, but partnership with Clevelanders and a partnership that we look to hope to take and partner with everyone to execute, create that River Valley that we all know. We thoroughly enjoy being a part of the process and really enjoy together.
Sure. Next, I would like to call up representative from NOACA, Andrew Stalky.
I just let everybody know that in order for this to be broadcast properly and everybody can hear you on YouTube, you really need to hold the mic fairly close to your mouth so that we're getting it through the speaker. Otherwise, people online are not going to. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Collier, Commission, our Executive Director and CEO, Grace Mucci. Incredibly wasn't able to be here this morning, but she asked me to read a statement on her. NOACA is proud of the comprehensive planning work completed as part of the Vision for the Valley TFCI, facilitating stakeholder efforts and community engagement to envision connectivity to and within the river. Reimagining a sense of place that integrates land use with a network of travel modes while encouraging development is transformative and capitalizes on assets in our region. We're celebrating this milestone and we're excited that this study is being recognized as an important community investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Next, I would like to call up Linda Zollheimer from the Port of Cleveland.
Good morning, commissioners. On behalf of the Port of Minister Mayor, and we talk about the Cuyahoga River, the importance also of the channel, and I think this plan really emphasizes the importance of coexistence, and so this is a framework for both development, industry, and public access.
Linda. And at this time, I would like to call Mr. Jim Havlin from Flats Forward.
Thank you, Director. Good morning. Chairman to the Commission. Flats Forward is very excited to be a part of this. I am Jim Havlin, Executive Director. Flats Forward, personally, I'm also very excited to be part of you again. This is a living, breathing document that will never sit on the shelf. You're going to see in this presentation that many of the recommendations are already being implemented. They are recommendations that have been vetted, public engagements. They have had consensus reached by all the partners as well. So it's going to serve as a guide or a playbook, if you like, for directing decisions related to planning and development going forward, how to have a safe and navigable river that is flourishing. So look forward to the presentation today. Thank you very much.
And you'll be hearing today, after my comments, from Arthur Schmidt and Matt Fields, who are representing the consultant team. We make up what's called the One Team. And as you can see, the mantra for this initiative is about unification. One vision, one river, one Cleveland. And Mayor Jackson always was focused on creating one seamless city. It was the focus of the Lakefront Plan. It's the focus of the Cuyahoga Harbor River Valley Initiative that you're going to hear today. So I talked a little bit about the importance of waterfronts. Cleveland is a city that has 2 waterfronts. And we have to focus on both of those if we are to realize our full potential. And when you look at the Cuyahoga River Valley, being a shipping channel, being very important for commerce, we also have to understand that the river valley is changing and it's going to become more dynamic. That presents some great opportunities, but it also creates some significant challenges. We also know that the river valley is the center of our city. It's a spine that connects the 8 miles waterfront. It traverses downtown, is linked to many neighborhoods. And one of the key advantages of our river valley is its topography, is that it's not predictable. And you're going to see in the presentation how we compare to some other cities with respect to this asset and the uniqueness of our river valley in difference to other communities. Next slide, please. You can't talk about the Cuyahoga River without talking about being a catalyst for economic growth. The Port of Cleveland, whose work really entails leveraging this very important asset and really understanding how history has played a part in moving us toward the future. We know that we see recreational as well as utilitarian uses, neither of which are going away. And we have to create a river that embraces 21st century development and investment, but also continues to support and reinforce the traditional economic activity that has made our city and region strong. When we think about the maritime industry, we're talking about roughly a $3.5 billion impact on our region. So we have to be very thoughtful with respect to how the river evolves, how it begins to embrace new investment, recreational activity, and it's also the confluence of multiple modes of transportation, which is one of the reasons why NOACA saw this to be a very important project. Nowhere in the city do you have rail, trail, maritime, pedestrian, and all of these modes converging in one location. Mr. Howard alluded to the fact that we're not starting from scratch here, we're capitalizing. There's a number of investments that have been made over the past 15 years. Last East Bank is one. And we also have planned investments. You'll also hear about some of the impediments that prevent us from investing as fast and as rapidly as we need to invest. And it's a significant infrastructure percent. Next slide. The other piece that we're actively doing is making sure that we create connections. And when we talk about creating connections, we're talking about taking old industrial lands and repurposing them with uses that bring people into the river valley and begins to change the look of the river valley to become a more environmentally friendly area. Our friends at the Metro Parks have been very aggressive about investments in trails and pedestrian networks. and linking those to this very important spot. Slide. Where we sit today, Merwin's Wharf also represents the type of activity that's going to be introduced into our river valley as we move forward into the future. Organizations like the Foundry, literally a stone's throw from here, are bringing boaters and recreational users to the river valley. Like Maurice Rubens on our staff, who's an avid rower. So this river has something for everyone. Next slide. But we also know that on that same river, those rowers have to contend with vessels of this scale. So how do you address that? That's the question. Next slide. And if you want to fiddle with that slide, this graphic shows you what that looks like head on. Next slide. And when we think about leveraging the river valley, we have to think of it like we would think about a commercial corridor in a retail district. The land uses that flank that river are extremely important. It's a thing that's going to draw people to the water. It's a thing that's going to create a place for families, a place for recreation, and a place for people to come and spend time and resources, hopefully, in the city of Cleveland. Next. Projects like Irish Town Bend and others that are already underway, and I want to emphasize something about the Vision for the Valley. There are efforts that are underway. We do not believe in planning for planning's sake. So efforts like Irish Town Bend that are up and running, part of what we wanted to do is make sure that we dealt with the opportunity areas that were not dealt with yet. You'll see the peninsula identification, the peninsulas that we focus on, they're additive, creating that connected seamless system. Next. Stratton Peninsula is another area where development and investment is underway. You recently approved, I believe a year and a half ago, 300 unit development in this peninsula for a residential development by NRP, which we hope post-COVID will continue to move forward. Next slide. We also need to understand how we can begin to utilize infrastructure like the bulkheads to meet a goal that Commissioner Curry has often and repeatedly stressed with respect to the river valley, and that's pedestrian access. There's no reason that a person should not be able to walk from asset to asset to asset along our river valley. Now, what's the competition? What are those other cities doing? And what are they doing right? This is an example of the Chicago Riverwalk. This is an example of a river being used like a commercial corridor, with people, with shops, people being able to sit and touch the water. Next slide. Detroit. Detroit has been working very hard to reinvest in its riverfront because it sits on the Detroit River and is also a neighbor to Canada. Next slide. And one of Ohio example, that's a signature riverfront reinvestment that's more pristine, more green. They had the advantage of having quite a bit of farmland prior to their city's existence. They leverage that green nature, environmentally friendly landscape and invested in what's called the Scioto Mile. Next slide. So that brings us back to Cleveland. What are we attempting to do? We see that to the northern flank is our downtown, which is the epicenter of the region. And one of the things that we're going to see in the presentation is a desire to connect to the river valley and connect out into the neighborhoods that flank the river valley. Much like the core waterfront along Lake Erie. We want to begin to bring that grid into the water and make those key connections. Next slide. We also talked about the challenges and dangers concerning the river valley. Obviously, the Cuyahoga River Valley is not a straight thoroughfare. It's extremely winding. That also poses challenges for those utilitarian vessels and those recreational boaters, as well as those who seek to dock at certain locations along the river valley. And these are some of those challenging points that exist where you see the red lines. Next slide. And also, when you look at where these neighborhoods exist in this web and how the river can be sort of that common denominator by creating linkages to various spots along the river valley, it becomes a true asset as we invest in those lands flanking. What's the reason to come to the river valley? If you're in Brooklyn Center, South Broadway, Fairfax, Central. Nicole is going to touch on that with you. She talks to you about how we engage. Next slide. So what is Vision for the Valley? Vision for the Valley is not one dimension. It's a framework. It's an approach that not only illustrates how we can connect to our water from a physical development standpoint, it also starts to bring together the human capital necessary to implement what you're going to see today. And it looks at nature, for example, and looking at places to connect to nature, such as the Towpath Trail at Stratton, the Cuyahoga River Fish Habitat Improvement Project that's underway, the Ohio Erie Canal Reservation, the Main Avenue Viaduct and Platts Bay Boardwalk. Next slide. Vision for the Valley is also about creating places to gather and connecting those places of gathering in the neighborhoods that flank the river to those places of gathering in the actual valley. It's also places for growth. We see the potential for more investment in the river valley. And we also see a main part of the river valley remaining industrial. So how do those two coexist? Next. So today's challenge is to craft one river for all, create one vision, and through support and cooperation, build one Cleveland with a healthier, more equitable, and more sustainable plan for the valley in the future. And we believe this is that first step. And forgive me for the big preamble, but it's important that we set the why. This is important. Next. I'm going to turn it over to Arthur Schmidt from OHM, who's going to take over the presentation. We're going to get specific and talk about some of the recommendations that the Vision for the Valley project entails.
Thank you, Director Collier. Good morning, Commission members. As Director Collier indicated, my name is Arthur Schmidt. I'm a project manager with OHM Advisors. My colleague, Matt Hills, principal with OHM Advisors, we're going to go through and talk about the meat and potatoes of the plan here as Freddie has set us up. Very quickly to talk about this image in our team. As Freddie indicated before, we really saw the consultant team and the partner team coming together and being one team. So very early on in the process, we identified ourselves as the one team and wanted to announce ourselves as that because we really felt all of us were invested and moving forward for this project. So Maurice, if you can go back just one really quick, thank you. From the consultant team side, OHM Advisors was leading the initiative. We had assistance from our team members from Trans Systems, from Synergy, from City Architecture, from Agency, Landscape and Planning, and Guide Studio. So that was the consultant team that was made up. And then as Freddie had indicated before, and as you heard from representatives from each member of the client team, NOACA, Port of Cleveland, City Planning Commission, Cleveland Metro Parks, and Flats Forward. And Maurice, if you go to the next one, that is what encompasses the one team, as you see there, as we took a photo at the Foundry, just across the street, where we held most of our stakeholder engagement meetings during this process. Maurice, if you go to the next one. So this planning process, this graphic kind of simplifies a very long and a very detailed process that we went through throughout this project for the Vision for the Valley. Throughout this process, though, there was multiple steps. There was multiple times that we engaged with members of the community. We engaged with one team members, and we also engaged with our stakeholders. So throughout this process, we were ensuring that we were speaking with our stakeholders, speaking with the community, checking in, understanding what the existing conditions were, getting feedback to some of our initial recommendations, and continuing to have conversations and evolve the plan once we've got things started. Our outreach throughout this project was multifaceted. We conducted over 22 different types of community meetings. We had design charrettes, we had focus group workshops, we had study area tours. During our early on in the process, we not only toured the valley by walking the valley, driving the valley, biking through the valley, but we also took a boat tour down the river valley to experience the river valley from the water itself. Actually, during that boat tour, we got stuck and had to dock here at Merwin's Wharf while we had a commercial vessel come down. So we really were experiencing the conflict there between at times with the commercial vessels and the recreational boating. So we conducted those types of tours. We had open houses. We had an interactive website. So through our website, that was really the hub of our activity. On there, we had conducted a virtual reality drone tour where we flew the entire river valley, that 8-mile stretch that Director Collier was talking about. So those on the those individuals who go on the website could actually fly through from a bird's eye perspective the study area, provide comments. We had an interactive project website map where you can kind of drop your comments exactly where you had either you felt there were opportunities or maybe issues. And then later on in the process, we had a worldwide global pandemic event occur that some of you may be familiar with, the COVID-19 pandemic. So that was the point in which we really had to kind of come together as a team and evaluate and assess how we were going to finish off our community engagement. Because throughout this process, and Nicole and I are going to talk about it, especially Nicole, we really wanted to make sure that we engaged everyone within the community, not just within the River Valley, but everyone within the city of Cleveland, because we know that there are a lot of visitors, a lot of individuals who come to this area or who want to come to this area. So in that last part, we hosted what we call the virtual community meeting. And what we did was we recorded ourselves doing a presentation about the draft plan, posted that presentation on our website, allowed people to provide their feedback, and then we hosted 6 different virtual office hours. And we broke down the study area, and individuals were able to sign in through the Zoom web app as well as Facebook Live and provide their comments, ask questions, and talk with members of the one team. We made ourselves available, had the opportunity for all of them to ask their questions and to better understand the final report as we were closing things down. So that project outreach right here, the first part of it was the stakeholder engagement and the focus group. So we reached out to over 1,000 different stakeholders within the River Valley, conducted these design charrettes, conducted these walking tours, these site tours, and worked with everyone together, both at the Foundry, who hosted most of our events, and some here even at Merwin's Wharf, where we talked about the issues, broke down the valley into the different components, broke it down into the different districts that we'll be talking about here momentarily, and really get down to kind of the meat and potatoes of what are the issues and what are the opportunities within the River Valley. And a lot of this began to shed some light on different stakeholders who were engaged previously with different planning initiatives. And it also brought different members of the community together who don't normally communicate with one another. So they were able to meet one another, they were able to talk together, understand each other better, because as Director Collier indicated, this is a river valley that has residential, that has commercial, that has retail, recreational, and it has industrial users and investors in this area. A lot of different sectors coming together, some of which don't know each other, some of which don't regularly speak with one another. So This process allowed them to do just that. And now I would like to invite up Nicole Calhoun from City Planning Commission to continue to talk about our project outreach.
That slide here that you see in front of you is paramount to what we're talking about. A lot of times we think about planning and we make sure all the right people are in the room. We make sure all the stakeholders are in the room. But then we forget the most important part is equity. At this meeting, it came very synergistically that we decided that there are a lot of important people that were not there. And that is the members of the community. The actual people that we want to come, the all in the all. And how safe is it for people that look like me to actually come down to the flats and actually have a good time? And then what is my meaning? When I think about the flats, I think of partying, I think of drinking and drug rates. Come on, we all know this, right? Right? Okay. So we wanted to create an environment for all, literally, regardless of your ability, the color of your skin, your social or economic abilities as well. The park, the land, the river is for all of us, meaning of every color, creed, and generation. So we scratched everything and went all the way back to the beginning. And we began to go into those different segments within our community, you know, the greater Cleveland area, those environments that are not necessarily as friendly. And that's one of the things that I have to promote our team about. We didn't fight the rhythm of Cleveland. Cleveland is a very diverse environment, and the people that were those stakeholders, those people that are in the surrounding neighborhoods, the surrounding cities actually want diversity. So we answered the call. Diversity is what you see here, is everybody's voice at every moment and giving their input. That's what makes this plan different from any other plan that you've ever had, because we actually stopped and did the work. Equity means that no matter who you are, no matter where you are welcome to the river, because the river is for all of us. When I say all, I mean all. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. So as we begin to go through the recommendations and the actual plan for the vision for the valley, as we've seen, this is a large study area. We're talking about an 8-mile stretch of river. We looked at approximately about 5,000 feet on either side was technically the study area of the river from the land perspective. So when you're looking at that large study area, we really started to think to ourselves, how do we break this down into a manageable way? And in a way, too, that when we develop these recommendations that Director Collier, that Sean McDermott, and Linda Sternheimer, that Andrew Stalkey and Jim Havlin from the partner organizations can begin to move forward and implement. So we did this by developing this vision framework that you see before you. So it started off with that purpose lens, and we'll go into this in just a minute here. And that purpose lens was to ask the question, why are we doing this? What is that purpose of all of this? The next layer to that framework was the plan components, and there was 5 plan components that we developed, and these were kind of the overarching kind of framework objectives that we worked with. From those plan components, we also developed 4 valley districts. Now, these are not districts to create new neighborhoods or new wayfinding or anything like that. They were just our way to kind of begin to break down this large study area, and it happened in a very natural way. These 4 valley districts, which Matt will discuss in a little bit, happened organically through the early steps of the process, again, to organize the study area. And then lastly, the recommendations, the actual specific projects, policies, and programs that are going to help move forward the overall plan for the Cuyahoga River Valley. So the purpose lens is our North Star. It's our guiding light. The purpose refocuses the question of what are we doing to why are we doing this? So what motivates people most is the mission and vision behind what you do. And the components to that are the why. So why are we doing it? The how, the actions you take to deliver on this purpose, And then the what's are those outcomes. So those what's are the recommendations that we'll talk to. So the why for us is that the purpose of this plan is to support and protect our river and lake so that these natural resources can continue to positively shape our community and position Cleveland as an innovative and unified waterfront city. That is our purpose. That was that North Star for us. The how to do it are those 4 icons on the right. So the how is, this is built on a foundation of equity and inclusion. It's to protect the health and safety of our waterway. It is to modernize our river, our port, and our land infrastructure. And it's to build awareness of the river and the river valley. So these hows help us to build that purpose. And as you'll see through the recommendations, those are the what's again, those outcomes. Each one of the recommendations that we built, we basically funneled them through these 4 hows to ensure that they were advancing at minimum at least one of these hows. If any one of our recommendations that we came up with, and we started with, I think, over 200 different recommendations, if any one of those recommendations did not advance one of those hows, it was not a recommendation that we move forward. Because we always wanted this to move forward to our purpose, to our North Star. If you go to the next slide, again, that purpose again, just drill down even further, is that we believe, our why, is that we believe that our riverfront and lakefront shape our city and our community. So again, as we were going through these recommendations, everything was getting funneled through our purpose lens, everything was getting funneled through our why, to make sure that we were staying true to what our ultimate goal was at the start of this project.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Matt Hills. So to continue describing how we organized this very large study area, very complicated study area with many, many recommendations coming out of the process, we broke, actually the partners had organized this for the most part prior to the project beginning into planning components of land use, mobility, and connectivity, both on land and on water, the environment and nature, public space, and brand and marketing. But you might think, well, what's with the brand and marketing part? Yeah, the project partners were wise enough to identify the need to create a brand for the Cuyahoga Valley, and then to have a strong marketing component as part of this plan in order to educate the public, educate all of us here, educate anybody who's interested about the valley, about the importance of the valley and the improvements that are coming out of the recommendation. Arthur mentioned that the valley districts came out of a very organic process, and each of these districts that you see in front of you were a result of some type of unifying set of characteristics. So, for instance, we all are familiar with the flats and the characteristics there of some industrial, but primarily residential and entertainment use. The peninsulas are formed more based on a geographic and a river configuration basis. Industrial Valley is formed based on the primary land use. And then Steel Yards is in a more transitional condition where there is a blend of industrial and commercial use. Arthur mentioned we ended up with close to 200 recommendations. Well, that needs some organization so you can really understand what's going on with that many different recommendations. So we did what you see here. Everything was viewed through the purpose lens. Everything was organized around those components I just spoke about. And then we had a principle. We organized those recommendations via a principle or some type of aspirational statement that was sky high, but sets the goal for all of us to reach that aspirational statement. The next step down was methods to achieve those principles. And then there were a series of strategies that were based around specific policies and projects to make these recommendations a reality. And so here you see the breakdown of those principles, initiatives, and strategies. We also started to prioritize the strategies in the implementation table. You will see in the report a prioritization that was set for all of them along with the timetable. And several significant ones were set as high priority strategies, 23 of them. So overall, we took an overall view of the valley and recommendations around everything that is common to the valley. We don't expect you to be able to see or read this, but there are some very important value-wide characteristics that we need to talk about briefly. First of all, the river really needs to be thought of as a corridor, just as we think of a street as a corridor. There is shipping and all types of boating, transportation, and traffic on that corridor. And then the roads start to align themselves with the corridor, with that river corridor as well. Sometimes the river becomes a barrier for people who need to get from one side of it to the other. However, through many, many years of hard work, the towpath trail has become a conduit along the river on the west side. I think everybody here has heard about the disparity between west side development and public access and east side. And so that is one item that we focused on during this process, was how do we improve access to the river from the east and then along the east side of the river.
So also, I want to point out on this map before we kind of break down into the plan components. As Director Collier was talking about earlier, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel in areas that were already planned out, already developed, or had plans to be developing. So you'll see on there in the kind of yellow on the screen, or maybe the goldenish color on the screen here, we identified those areas. So that's Irish Town Bend, that's Flats West Bank, Flats East Bank, the Waterfront District Master Plan. When we talk about Thunderbird and Scranton Peninsula, when you talk about the Big Creek Master Plan, these are the initiatives that we identified. We talked with the project team, with the one team, made sure that we weren't reinventing the wheel, and again, focusing our efforts in the focus areas that we'll talk about on areas that didn't have those kind of master plans developed, or maybe they did, and we were trying to look at how do we connect those pieces all together. Those plans also include the recreational aspects. So we're talking about the trails, Centennial Lake Link Trail, the towpath trail. We're talking about Canal Basin Park. We're talking about Wendy Park. So again, building on the existing, identifying what is there, what has been planned out already, and how do we fill in those gaps and look at those disparities that Matt and Director Collier were talking about before to move forward on. So very quickly, we want to break down each of the plan components and just talk about some of the high-level strategies, the key strategies throughout this plan. So for land use, this is really the foundation of the plan as it begins to define how development and activities are organized to create place. So again, as we were crafting this document, we were building on the existing plans that have already been developed, but we were looking at opportunities to create strategic redevelopment. So we recognize the Center Street area. We looked at West 3rd Street, the corridor, as opportunities to build on and reimagine these areas into potential mixed-use developments. We also looked at areas where there's existing industrial sites that either can continue to be industrial sites, expand on them, and continue to be the backbone for the River Valley. Other things that we identified beyond kind of the new development opportunities there, discussions around Collision Bend, discussions around the Flat South area, looking at Columbus Road, identifying that as an area for future new and redevelopment opportunities. The other thing that we talked about here with respect to land use is how do we develop standards, how do we develop guidelines, how do we upgrade the zoning in some of these areas to accommodate the type of uses and the type of development that we want to see in the future. So one of the key strategies was to develop those standards and guidelines. And part of that is also identifying, ensuring that public access along the riverfront. So those new areas that haven't been developed already, that have access to the riverfront or the potential for that access, making sure that we maintain that and create that river boardwalk that we heard so clearly throughout our engagement process, the desire of not only stakeholders, but also members of the community. Last point I'd like to make on this is also the improved integration of Lakeview Terrace in the Flats area. That was another area that we heard loud and clear through our stakeholder and community process is the residents at Lakeview feeling disconnected, not only to the neighborhood to the south with Ohio City, but also disconnected to the river itself. I think we should mention one story. I think it was Kelly and Sarah during one of our engagement efforts at Winterfest, spoke with several individuals. We were at Poe Square, right, for that event. And one of the questions was, do you know where the river is? And I think they received a lot of comments that people had no idea where the river was. They could not identify where the river was. And they are from Cleveland, from the state, what have you, from the region, and couldn't identify where it was. And that was even the case too when we engaged with some of the residents from Lakeview. They hadn't experienced the river. They saw it, they could see it in the distance, but they never engaged with it. They never felt the desire or the feeling of being accepted to go and interact with the river. So that is a key piece as we move forward from the land use recommendation. When we talk about mobility, we broke down mobility both on land and water. So we really look at mobility as that movement throughout the river valley. It is incredibly critical, but it's also very complex when we're looking at this. All the modes of transportation, both on land and river, are active, but they are not fully integrated with one another. If you look at the river valley, especially on land, you have certain corridors that are in desperate need of roadway improvements. When we're looking at some of the key corridors from the land perspective, we identified Main Avenue, Canal Road, West 3rd Street, Center Street, Columbus Road, and Independence Road as some of those key corridors that could be improved, not only from a vehicular perspective, but also for pedestrians, for cyclists, to just improve the overall connection. We also looked at the opportunity for complete streets on some of these. Now, we're not saying that every one of these key corridors needs to be a complete street, but we began to identify some of those streets that rose to that level, Center Street being one of them. We want to continue the trail implementation. The partners on the team, along with several other organizations, have been doing an A+ job of connecting all our trails, bringing all those visions to fruition, creating those connections. So not only continuing those trail implementation projects, but looking at opportunities to how do we extend those trails to new opportunities from a land use perspective. The other point that we want to make is creating those connections to the valley. As Director Collier talked about before, the topography of the valley provides some breathtaking view sheds to look into the valley and beyond. So how do we take those, enhance those, build off those, and to create a sense of desire to come down and interact with the valley, whether that's through pedestrian bridges or other methods to connect folks down there. The last piece I want to point out is also public transit. We have a couple of stations, both at Settlers Landing, that can be enhanced or enhanced connections to. We have it at the Campus District Station further south. How do we build off those existing stations for rail, for rapid transit to connect to RTA? We have those assets there. We have Tower City, which is a huge RTA hub for rapid transit and connects up to Public Square. So we want to look at how we can enhance those connections up to those connections and make sure that we're improving the connections and the availability for all mobile users throughout the valley. From the water aspect, as we've heard several times, this river is not only a federal shipping channel, it is an American Heritage River, and it's also a state designated water trail. And so throughout this process, we kept emphasizing the fact that the commercial shipping and the recreational activities are going to continue. Again, the commercial shipping is that backbone to the industry. It's the backbone to our region. And we feel that the two activities, the two users can coexist together. But what we have to emphasize is the river safety aspect. So with that, by that increasing of the recreational activities, we want to make sure that we increase safety. So that's signage for water users. That's making sure that users know where it is safe to dock, where the safe zones are, what they do in certain situations. It's also making sure that when they want to access the water, they're doing so in areas and at spaces that are safe to do so. So with our team members from Trans-Systems, we identified throughout the river valley safe water access points that are new, that may not already be existing. One of those is identifying a safe harbor, and we're calling it a safe harbor because we also see that zone as a potential for not only motorized boats, but for non-motorized boat users to kind of access when a commercial shipping vessel is coming through. And Matt will talk about that a little bit more when we focus in on the collision event focus area. Last points I want to make here, the bridge operations. Improving communications with the bridge through common apps and in a way to signalize to users throughout the valley when those bridges are coming up, when they have access to them, or can get across to them. And then the last thing, bulkhead management. It is a critical piece to this river valley. It requires further evaluation. We need to establish a sustainable management strategy for this. The bulkheads are really the backbone to our river. If we are failing in bulkheading, then the opportunities from the land use perspective go away. So we need to come up with strategies. And you'll see throughout this, and Matt will talk about it in the environmental section, of ways that we can help with the bulkheading in certain areas. So that way resources can be focused in on those specific areas that need bulkheading.
Our fourth main component is public space. And there is some riverfront access, as we have along here outside our windows, but not nearly enough. There is also a great need for public spaces. There certainly is a conversation happening right now about starting to look at a public realm plan for the Flats District. That's just one example of how we can start taking the next step towards getting more public access to the river and along the river. We started to look at some typologies, as you can see in the middle there, of what that public space and what the riverfront access might look like. And then on the right-hand side, we took a quick look at where we needed to start looking at public art and how to reemphasize our heritage and some of the iconic elements that are within the valley already. Let's relight our bridges as we had done 30 years ago, but the recommendation in the report also states that we need to have a maintenance plan tied to that so that we can continue on with that lighting rather than sailing. There is a great need for striking a balance with our environment along the river based on our very strong and long industrial heritage. There are only a few spaces along the river that we have undeveloped green space. There are lots of opportunities, however, in areas that are underutilized or not utilized anymore to help Mother Nature revert back to a more natural setting. This is all about balance. We are not suggesting that current industrial uses or other active uses be removed and replaced with natural restoration. But we are suggesting that there are opportunities and there's a very big need for us to green up a bigger portion of the valley. I mentioned brand and marketing earlier. We found all kinds of interesting things out when we had our engagement series throughout the project. One was that we heard from a lot of people, everybody's heard about how clean the river is now, 50 years after it was on fire multiple times. But we heard a lot of people say, that river's still dirty. Well, yes, it does look turbid, but compared to 50 years ago, it is amazingly clean to the point where it's safe enough now that the paddle fest is going to happen in a few weeks right down here on the river. People are going to be paddling on their stand-up paddle boards and their kayaks. They're going to fall into the river. They're not going to melt and die. So a lot of the general public doesn't know that though, and so we need to educate them about that. There are a lot of other opportunities here for marketing the river for all of these improvements that we're recommending that are coming out of this plan. So to keep things moving along, we'll take a quick look at a few focus areas. We mentioned earlier that the project area kind of broke itself down into 4 districts. We looked at one focus area within each of those districts. Thank you. As Arthur had mentioned before, we did not try to reinvent the wheel. For those areas that already had a plan, we left those alone. However, within each of the districts, we did find opportunities or areas of need that needed some more detailed planning than has currently been done. So for instance, and if you take a look at the key on the top right-hand side, you'll see where each of these focus areas is. This is at the north end of the river, right south of Lake Erie. And it focuses on the peninsula that the shoreway goes across. In this area, the Jacobs Group redevelopment and Irishtown Bend are already there or underway. But there are areas such as the Lakeview Terrace by the Cuyahoga Metropolitan Housing Authority, where there are many needs, both for environmental justice, better connectivity, and better overall public space. That this plan made recommendations about, and it is very exciting to see, and Director Collier and the rest of our project partners will talk about. This is one of several initiatives that are already underway. In fact, I just counted last night 12 different initiatives that are underway that are coming out from this plan. The next area we took a close look at is what we call the collision band area. You can see why it was named that. Right now, that is a vast sea of asphalt and parking. If talk about underutilized, with all the energy that we're seeing in the river valley these days, if this is not an area of opportunity, then I don't know what is. You can see the plan, this isometric plan, recommending a blend of perhaps office, residential, mixed use towards the Gateway District and Tower City, and then immediately adjacent to the river, a ribbon of green and open public space. You can see the orange lines immediately along each river edge. That signifies a continuous boardwalk. This was one of the, Arthur mentioned before, one of the things we heard loud and clear. Continuous riverfront boardwalk along this northern section. Lastly, before we move to the next focus area, you'll see in the bottom right-hand area of the isometric, the safe harbor. This is where we found to be a safe location for motorized boats to dock for transportation purposes, non-motorized water vessels to move into when a shipping vessel is coming through, so they have a safe haven. And then also a location for that has potential for fish habitat. This could be a safe harbor for fish as well. There needs to be a string of pearls on a bead, if you will. Pearls on a string going all along the river where fish can jump from point to point to get themselves up and down the river.
And then this is just a rendering to show a little bit more detail with respect to collision bend and vision for this area. The next focus area is Jefferson Link, what we've called Jefferson Link. And this focus area offers a pilot opportunity to begin to transform industrial properties into community destinations, which begin to remediate and reconnect surrounding neighborhoods to recreation and recreational spaces along the riverfront. I want to give a quick background story to this focus area because it is my favorite of this project and it just speaks to why we do community engagement. We were engaging with community at the Cleveland Sustainable Expo, which feels like 50 years ago with everything due to COVID, but was back in 2019, right? 2019, days and times just weeks together. While we were at the sustainability conference, we had a few individuals come up to us who had heard about the Vision for the Valley study, knew we were going to be there and wanted to interact with us. They were actually business owners industrial business owners down in this area from Zachlon Properties. The three gentlemen approached the project team and said, "We love what you're doing with the Vision for the Valley. We actually have some property along the waterfront here that we're not using anymore, and we're looking to potentially sell. We would love to have you guys take a look at it and see what we could do with this property to contribute to this plan." So this focus area at the beginning had not come up, but through that conversation, through that community engagement, discussing with stakeholders, this opportunity and this focus area came front and center. So within this focus area, we are centering around a 3-acre parcel along the riverfront here. This is actually where the head of the Regala starts. I'm confirming with Maurice, who I know is a role over there. So this offers a great opportunity to create a recreational open space, to create a connection down to the riverfront, and more importantly, be able to start creating that connection to the riverfront for the east side communities. You have the Solid Village Downtown Connector Trail, which is making its way through implementation. So creating a connection, an extension off of that to come down to this space. You have from previous TLCI studies, the proposed Kingsbury Run, the Kingsbury Run Park, the Old Jefferson Street Bridge. So you have initiatives that have started, but now with this opportunity, we can center ourselves around this former industrial property to begin that remediation, to begin that enhanced ecological zone, to create those fish habitats, and again, bring back the access, bring back the recreational, and create another water point access. And we're happy to say that property is working through the changing of hands to become this recreational open space that we vision through this process. So this is something for us that we're incredibly excited about. We can't give too much details beyond that right now as they're working through everything, but it is moving forward to create that recreational open space that we were all envisioning as part of this process. The last focus area that we identified was what we call Big Creek Gateway. And this is at the southern end of our study area. This is outside of the federal shipping channel. The previous focus area we were looking at, that kind of turnaround basin, is the southernmost edge of the federal shipping channel. So what we're looking at here is outside of that federal shipping channel. It is still part of the state designated water trail. And what we saw here, again, was that potential to offer a gateway to the northern half of the river. Some of you may see there have been a lot of individuals who have done the journey down the Cuyahoga River through their kayaks and other non-motorized boats going south along the Cuyahoga River. So we saw this as an opportunity to pair up with the Ohio Erie Canal Reservation Trailhead to create what we're kind of coining a river trailhead for those river users. So this could be a launch point for recreational boating, kayaks, rowing, canoes, what have you. But again, it also offers another opportunity, a pilot opportunity to enhance the ecological features within the river valley, take over some of the old industrial sites that have been abandoned, have remediation, look for opportunities for fish habitat, and really kind of center this around the recreational opportunities that there exist along the water. So not only is it a great connection with the existing towpath trail, with the Treadway Creek Trail, connecting to Big Creek and the Big Creek master plan. So from that southern edge of the property, and again, you can see on the top right, as it relates to the overall study area, this really becomes that major gateway for river users and trail users. So we see this as a great recreational opportunity, and again, the river trailhead opportunity. And now I'm going to hand it back over. Well, maybe not. What we want to do is just go through some of those plans and initiatives that we were mentioning before. That while we've been going through finishing this process, getting ready to come to you, the commission members, and present this for adoption. That I think, as Jim Hadlin had mentioned in his opening conversation, his opening talk, that we've been moving forward. Initiatives have been moving forward during this time. We've been taking steps to implement the recommendations, implement the strategies that we have outlined before. And each one of these strategies is outlined here. Perfect time, right? So I'm going to hand it back over to Director Collier to begin talking about some of these initiatives moving forward.
Thank you, Arthur. And I do want to reiterate a couple of things that were stated in the presentation. This is planning and doing. These are not shots in the dark that we're making. There's a number of different activities that are going on. Each one of our team members are going to talk about some of the specifics of each one of these things that are already in play. Maurice, if you can go back to the CMHA slide, I do want to emphasize a couple of points with respect to the first area. Go back up, please. Yeah, keep going. Go back right there. So this area is really critical. This area is critical for a number of reasons. When we talk about the investments that are being made, we saw the significant investment that the Metro Parks just made in the Wendy Park Bridge, which is really a key first step, and I'll emphasize first step, to really making a connection to this peninsula that would actually connect Lakeview residents to Wendy Park. We also know that there's further work being done to get over the river. The Wendy Park Bridge gets you over the tracks, but part of the additional work that we have to do is get people connected over the river. The other component that's really important here is connecting Lakeview to the other areas of the peninsula. If you're in Lakeview, you don't even know that you're literally connected to Nautica. You're in the same peninsula on the same grid. These areas feel so isolated. CMHA is underway with its master plan currently. OHM advisors, due to the, in part because of the work that's already been done, was selected. So there's an opportunity for us to carry forward this vision of really connecting those estates to the broader peninsula and creating opportunities for those residents to become truly a part of the Ohio City neighborhood. And one of the key infrastructure pieces that we want to pursue is really looking at how that Main Avenue Bridge literally serves as a divider. How do we begin to connect the Lakeview residents to Ohio City? Potentially punching through the wall that exists there that separates those residents from Ohio City. And looking at opportunities for them to be able to connect seamlessly rather than going across that very narrow 28th Street spine that exists there today. The other component of this that's really important to understand is how do we make sure that the Nautica Sea of Parking and those areas are developed in a way where this becomes truly a holistic peninsula rather than these quadrants that are divided up by infrastructure where people feel isolated. Next slide. And in this image, I want to reemphasize some very key points that we have to be bullish about and really make sure that we're working with partners. When I talk about connecting the downtown grid and bringing people to the border, and to Nicole's point that she was talking about earlier, green space is a great equalizer. And when you can actually have quality public spaces that pull you through the city, that connects you to the water, to take advantage of those vistas, it sends a message. There's a reason why the Chicago waterfront is so well done, because there's so much public amenity and public space. When you start developing your waterfront, you have parking lots and all private development, you may as well put up a sign that the community is not welcome. So these are important principles. And this is part of the reason why the framework plan is so critical at this juncture. To really look at how we incorporate public space into the scenario of actual development. And then the other piece here, when we talk about safety, and you see the inlet cut out for the harbor there, that was a concept that was thought of where you have this narrow river, you have these large vessels. How can we create safe docking, and how can we utilize the inland to take advantage of new real estate that we may have not thought about for boating before, getting people off the corridor? And then the last component that's really important, and this goes to something Commissioner Curry has been talking about for a long time with respect to the contiguous boardwalk, the windy nature of the river, the spotty ownership between industrial users, residential properties, et cetera. It makes that prospect very complicated. So how do you begin to overcome that? Well, there's a couple of things that we envision that could be done to address that. One, industrial users should not be isolated. They should not gate off their properties when it faces the river. We have to make sure that we're thinking about how we can open up portions of property to the public and for their employees. Just because you have an industrial property doesn't mean that you can't have a pristine environment along the riverfront on your property to make those connections. The other component that's really critical is looking for areas when you're trying to create a contiguous boardwalk where you can actually butt out into the river, but also go inland and not just have your boardwalk just fixed along one single edge, but having it meander. So these are all strategies that we believe that can be pursued with respect to addressing some key human scale components that's going to make the river more appealing and more inviting for people of all walks of life. Next slide, please. And again, this image, just kind of shows you what those possibilities are. Next. And Jefferson Link is really about creating opportunities for neighborhoods. And another component that we didn't talk about much in the presentation, and I know Kelly and the Metro Parks are very focused on, is we also have to think about making sure that we can protect habitat. Habitat protection can't happen on the river valley. And there's interventions that they are working on to really look at how do you begin to protect habitat along our 8 Mile Lake Erie waterfront, but also looking at it for the river valley. Last slide, please. There you go. So I want to talk about a couple of things here. One, bulkheads. Bulkheads is a critical piece of the puzzle. And I want to invite a good friend, Linda, up to talk to you about the importance of bulkheads and what we need to do to address that issue.
So I get the honor of talking. I know a lot of us know what bulkheads are, but I assume that everyone in the has within reading on rivers. So bulkheads are what we most commonly see here are the steel sheet piles that you see along the river and on the port where the boats stop. They're also some are concrete, some used to be timber, but the idea is holding the land back naturally and once the land. So this river, as mentioned, is so it's first mandates that it remains open. That so bulkheading is necessary to keep. So 5 years ago, the port did a study of looking at bulk on the ship channel and assessment conditions to this both above water line, and then did an underwater survey as well. So what we've seen since that and development along the river is that it's a barrier. Realize how expensive it is. A lot of our bulkhead is at or beyond its life. So looking forward, one of the initiatives and institute a technical assistance panel. So looking at what other communities, other cities have done to manage their bulkheads as an asset. So for implementing upgrades, how can we make sure that those are maintained throughout not just their life, but they're slowly getting upgraded as so it's not a problem across the river.
So, good morning. My name is Tilly Kaufman, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the aspect along the river. You see this, it's a dynamic natural system. It's a transportation corridor that's regional street. It's a great recreational amenity. How do we balance those uses? You've heard a lot about all these competing factors, and so we're excited to be part of this partnership for the plan. We also, as Cleveland Metro Parks, participate in the Cuyahoga River Safety Task Force that helps, again, mesh those various uses. and we're partnering with Water Trail. Paddler education of the Water Trail. You'll see a great sign at an access point really just outside our doors here today, but it also provides education to paddlers who may be accessing the river up in the national park where it's a completely different experience. So we want to give people that healthy respect and understanding of what it means when they may meet a freighter in this river channel. Best practices they can take so that they stay safe and everyone can have an enjoyable experience on this amazing resource. With that, over to Jim.
Thank you, Kelly. One other thing on safety. So Cuyahoga River, I think, was voted, correct me if I was wrong, the best urban river for kayaking in the United States. So you're going to see increased use, which is exciting, but the challenges are there. So one of the other things we're looking at doing, again, from an implementation standpoint, is fast forward the city and our partners are looking at installing webcams on the bridges so that you can take a look at the conditions of the water, boat activity ahead of time, whether you're a pilot of a boat or if you're in a kayak, you can just use your iPhone to see what the conditions are. Things like that generate out of this. I'll be brief on the other items that I want to talk about. So there is a plan in place right now that's moving forward with our partners to look at design guidelines for trails, parks, and green space. This is important because you have Irishtown Bend and Elk Basin Park, but you have other developments that will benefit from having these guidelines in place. For example, we talked about Jacobs, 5.6 acres of land. When that developer buys that land, there's going to be need for boardwalk, concrete, lighting. What kind of rails are we going to use? That's going to be something they can look at and we can all judge. The next is the Columbus Road Peninsula Vision Plan. I would almost call it a development plan. We have a signed contract. On Columbus Road, we talked about the importance of it, but it was not detailed in the vision for the valley. We're going to take a look at this and make sure that we understand how to guide current and future development. Tremendous opportunities with real estate coming online from Raincraft closing, Flats Industrial Railroad that is closing. So we want to make sure that we have a guide for future development to make sense on that peninsula, and we will be coming back to you with the plan in the near future. The Vision for the Valley Coalition. We've heard a lot about partnerships of one team. We need to have somebody that's going to implement this. Quite simply, this team, this coalition, we're just going to continue. Flash Forward as an organization is uniquely positioned to help convene, organize, and move these implementations forward. Our board is made up of maritime and industry, entertainment, residential development, neighborhood partners. The list is all inclusive and was designed that way so that we can partner and help move things forward. And then lastly, the Superior Avenue Viaduct study. This is something that Councilman McCormick really wants to see us move forward. That piece of infrastructure is historic, it's dynamic. The views from it are very important, and there is development happening around the viaduct. And this is another study that's about to move forward. So as you can see, it's all moving forward. It is it's being coordinated by all of us. And these are plans that some of them generated from the work that was being done by the study. One last thing I'll say, in the Columbus Road Plan and all of these plans, it's all about coexistence. Nowhere did we say we're going to move an industry, right, company out. It's all about making the connections for everybody. I just wanted to reinforce that as well. So I'll hand this over to Rick. Thank you.
So these last four items I'm going to touch on before we get in depth with the questions from the commission. So we're anxious to have an exchange with you guys. The Cuyahoga River Boardwalk, I talked a little bit about that earlier on and the importance of making that connection. I think it's one of the key things that is going to be easy in some areas and difficult in others, to say the least. But I think it's also tied to something again that I know Commissioner Curry has emphasized with strategic rezoning and the proactive nature that we have to have when we talk about rezoning. We also know that zoning, my good friend Kyle Reese is out there. can really be a hornet's nest sometimes, you know, when you're thinking about rezoning property. And one of the things that we wanted to do with respect to the strategic rezoning is really work with property owners to really think about whether or not we need to have access easements and things of that nature to create the opportunities for that trail connection that we talk about. And the other thing that the rezoning piece I think is important to examine is how do we rezone areas comprehensively? That's extremely important, particularly those areas where the conditions are not set yet. We can really set the conditions. The other project that has been long underway, thanks to so many people, and is the last leg of the towpath trail, Canal Basin Park. Can't emphasize enough how important Canal Basin Park is. There has been investments by the city and Metro Parks in Canal Basin Park. We will be coming back before the Planning Commission on the full vision plan for Canal Basin Park that's been worked on. And there's also been some investment that's going to be made very soon around the actual last leg of the towpath trail so that the towpath trail doesn't end up in a parking lot. And then Ontario Street Study. There's a partnership with NOACA Cavaliers, Len Komorowski, his team, and a host of stakeholders looking at the importance of Ontario Street. Ontario has the ability to be a two-sided street. Right now, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse is on one side, and then you have a bluff that has nothing but parking underneath it. So when you saw the image in Collision Bend, what you saw was really reestablishing that peninsula. That is also going to help make Ontario Street much more significant. Also included in that is the Lake Leap Trail. The Memorial Trail Loop that would connect Ontario, Huron, with the Detroit Superior Bridge, West 25th Street, and also the Lorraine Bridge. So these are the initiatives that are underway. And we hope that we have shared what this vision is all about with you today. Some of the strategic moves that we believe are going to be instrumental in helping to move the ball on these. And really look forward to, as a team, taking your questions and having a dialogue with the commission today. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm turning it back over to you, sir.
Thank you, Freddie. Who wants to start off that question?
Pass the microphone down. First of all, thank you to everyone for coming. This is a very impressive and exciting presentation. And I think we all, as Clevelanders, recognize the asset of the flats and the river, and it's really exciting when people come to visit from out of town. And it's a very unique experience as far as American cities go. And I think as the planners in the room, we all see the vision and know what it can be, and it's exciting to start to put the paper. I actually don't have too much. I think it's a great plan. I guess my two questions or suggestions are, I think Cleveland has been just really excited and impressed by the implementation of the Red Line Greenway. And I'm wondering if there's an ability, and if it was discussed, and if not, maybe to build it in. There have been plans for many years of a trail into the valley along Walworth Run, Train Avenue. That's kind of ebbed and flowed. But then also on the east side, and a challenge I kind of put to the group, Kingsbury Run is another culverted waterway that comes in from the central Kinsman neighborhood. And I think that it would be very amazing if there was kind of an east side counterpart to the Red Line Greenway, a way to bring people from that neighborhood through a trail down into that Jefferson Link. Right, it wouldn't necessarily be easy. There's a lot of properties and industry through there, but I think it could certainly be achieved at, using portions of the RTA right away, the train right away, and then cutting down through down into that Jefferson Link, so that people from the eastern neighborhoods and the southeast, Broadway, Slavic Village area, will both be able to kind of converge into the valley at that point. So that's one of my that was my big thing that I wrote down. That I'd love to think more about.
To Commissioner Schleifer, actually, when we did the Sustainable Cleveland 2019 Summit, there was a gentleman who came up with some similar thinking, just like what you just described. And he talked about the fact that there's a lot of opportunity to daylight some stream boundaries there to make those connections into the neighborhood and complement those with trails. And that it will bring sort of that beauty into the neighborhood. So that is something that I recall very specifically that was mentioned. So I think you're spot on.
Yeah, Councilman, we do talk about that in the plan, with respect to Kingsbury Run and that connection, identifying that, especially through the sustainability summit with, working with the, owners and workers at Zachlon. Like, it kind of all works together at that sustainability summit for that focus area. And I appreciate you bringing that up because I should have mentioned it when we were talking about it. But yes, we looked at Kingsbury Run, we talked about it, that connection down to now that space, that Zachlon space, what we're kind of calling it at this moment. And then also looking at how we can create that extension from the downtown Solid Village Connector Trail to connect down to that space. So that way it does create that greater access for those residents on the east side of the neighborhood. To your first question related to Warworth and Train Avenue, we did start talking about that. And we do talk about it in the recommendations as a spur with respect to those trail opportunities. But we didn't dive as deep as maybe we had with some of the other connections with that one, but we do recognize it and we do mention it in terms of the recommendations as an element to start talking about a little bit more. Because there were some other, I think the Flats Industrial Railroad, and Jim can probably speak at this too, very late on in the process when we were beginning to finish things up, also kind of approached us about opportunities with train right of ways and so on and so forth. So some of those opportunities that came up toward the tail end, we didn't want to ignore. We wanted to include, so that way this document allow us to continue looking at them a little bit deeper, because just at the time that we were discussing that with them, there wasn't a lot of detail and a lot of opportunity to discuss further. And especially that one happened right at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, where that kind of communication specifically with them unfortunately couldn't go any deeper. But both of those elements have been mentioned and talked about in the plan.
I'm also going to put our good friend Sean on the spot with respect to the conversation around the Red Line Greenway and the connectivity and the potential that that has, because that's another significant point that I think was made. So Sean, if I could actually back up and talk about the race area. So we've got a great opportunity here where we're setting this plan, and you've heard it several times already, that it's not sitting on a shelf. We're already looking to push. So we, in partnership with the city of Cleveland, have submitted for a race plan here as part of Oregon Cuyahoga Greenways, where we are looking to plan those connections. So along Kingsbury, top Kingsbury, really from Opportunity Corridor to connect to Slavic Village Connector, and then Slavic Village Connector itself. How do we mimic what has already been accomplished, mostly on the west side of the river, east side of the river, this entire network? So yes, thinking the same way. At the same time, when we're building the trail corridors like the Red Line Greenway, try to institute as many connections as we can and build that initial spine. Build them in a way that we can continue to connect them sequentially. So we know there are sections of the Red Line that between 25th and 41st where we need to continue to connect. So we'll do the same when we're doing the studies on trail connections. I think we're going to ask some Red Line all the way into.
I was going to say the West. I guess one more comment, and then this isn't necessarily related to the Parks and Trails separate idea, but when it comes to the completed green streets, we focus a lot on the Riverway being, a multimodal corridor. But I know you know this, but I think it's just worth us all thinking through. The road network still, as we're bringing more people into the flats, walking, biking, what have you. Like obviously, there's still going to be a lot of industrial traffic, and we've seen that recently with, dare I say, some controversy with Willow Street Bridge and then Lakeview Terrace. And I want to think through, especially that West 3rd Street corridor down at the bottom of the hill in Tremont. As we start to activate those portions, there's going to be more conflict between people on bikes and large industrial traffic, and aiming the industrial uses along the river, which I believe we should, we'll have to solve for that. So that's a big idea, and just how can we make sure that people are safe off road trails and other amenities so that large dump trucks can still go through without me being worried as a parent.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Councilman. So yes, through this plan, we identified all the trucking routes, and you can confirm that those trucking routes are still valid. They're still connecting where they need to. So not only identifying those, but we also created kind of little street sections, little vignettes as part of the plan in the mobility section of the plan that talks exactly about that. So on those trucking routes, looking for separated bike infrastructure, making sure that there is a clean, clear buffer between the cyclists and especially on those truck routes, and then also making sure that on those streetscape too, there is a good landscape edge buffer for pedestrians along those routes. Because I think some of us who were on the walking tour when we were down here experienced that head on as we were walking down West Third, as we were walking down Canal, as we were walking down Center. Just that experience as we're walking on the sidewalk that's there, right, and then experiencing those trucks going through. So it goes back to what we've been saying throughout this presentation, is that we are not trying to kick anyone out, move anyone. We feel that this area can be a true mixed-use neighborhood with residential, commercial, industrial, and recreational. But it's making sure that all those modes, all those individuals feel welcome, feel comfortable, and have the amenities that they need. So to that, making sure that those trucking routes are maintained, are in good condition, but then making sure that those other modes of transportation feel welcome and feel safe moving from east to west, north to south on those corridors.
Director, that was my question. Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear about the integration of Lake Terrace into this plan. That's really, really important. And also, I heard you talk about the lighting of the bridges. Do you have a plan for lighting out, like the towpath areas, and to make it really safe down in the flats when you're doing the project? That's my first question. And my second question is, where is the residential development going to take place exactly? Do you know? Is it going to be condos, apartments, single residential dwellings? Those are the questions.
Thank you, Ms. Madam Chairperson. Commissioner. My mind is all over the place. So I'm gonna take your last question first.
Okay.
With respect to housing development, the housing types that are starting to come up down here are of varying degrees. And that's something that we welcome as a commission, and that's something that we're promoting is a diversity of product. Because when you get a diversity of product, a diversity of price point, you get a diversity of people. All right, so having a diversity of rental options, you see some of that in the Flats East Bay. Having, higher end, properties and condos being developed, you see that along Columbus Road. And there's a multitude of different proposals that are on the table with respect to high-rise residential and some other things. So we welcome a mix of housing types and products, and they're going various locations. There's a number of different proposals that we can share with respect to Nautica and other things, where it's been envisioned to sort of start to build out vast parking lots into actual neighborhoods. The other, the second question that you asked with respect to trails, safety, critical. So the Canal Basin Park piece that we're talking about in the towpath trail is going to be, as well as some of the Centennial Trail and some of the other trail developments, I believe all have lighting on. And at night, as the area transitions, people still feel that sense of suspicion. But I can tell you, if you when you get a chance, if you haven't, open tree line and start by Solowski's and take the trail, you're going to experience something like you've never experienced before. I mean, that's a really hallmark investment that's been made. Taking my kids up there at night, and we've ridden a lot of the trails in that area so far, and I feel perfectly safe. There are some spots that are spotty, but at the same time, as we build out the system, I think that safety is going to continue to be sort of a very important component of the whole trail network. And again, in the metro parks of the city, we want people using these things frequently. And I'm telling you, during COVID-19, we haven't learned as a result of COVID-19 how important trails are. When everything else is cut off, people default to nature, they default to getting to the metro parks. And if you go into every retail establishment, try to buy a bicycle during COVID, you couldn't find them. they're always sold out. So that's the signal that these investments in trail and green spaces, they matter. And they are about economic development. It's not just some feel-good thing. I think people need to change their mindset with respect to looking at trail development, green spaces as a tool to drive economic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to echo the comments about how wonderful the planning process has been, how inclusive it has been, how important the moment is. And so I have two ideas, comments, and one not surprising, really, but one may. But the first, I'll start with the first one, is that I think I'm thinking a lot about cities in America and even globally, and how waterfronts, riverfronts, lakefronts get done over time. And as I raise this just to think about, I know there's a lot of people starting to think about it, which is as important as a plan is, it's equally as important as the organizational infrastructure to get it done. And so I think there is a moment for Cleveland when you think about Chicago or Boston or any other city that has an institution, both has the purview as well as the mechanisms in place, like the Boston Redevelopment Authority, etc. And so I do think it's time for Cleveland to consider a waterfront and redevelopment authority that like the Metro Parks, which is so amazing, 100-year institution that has built a system, not because of any particular project, but because it's here and has the mechanisms in place to do it over a long period. And if you were to ask my opinion about why Cleveland doesn't have a lot of waterfronts or that it's not because of any particular project, or not because we haven't had avoided plans. It's actually because we haven't had a structure that wakes up every day and pushes the city and the Metro Parks County and everybody else to get it done. So I'm challenging the community as a whole to say the time may be right for the council and others and other institutions here to build that infrastructure foundations. Everybody, we should come together, because the moment on the lakefront, and when I say lakefront, I mean the big lakefront, not just North Coast Harbor. I mean from Euclid up, the whole system requires governments to work together, institutions to work together, amazing things like the port and the Metro Parks and others to come together in a structural way. That's my first comment. And I challenge all of us, commission, council, the partners to get together and start to do that. The second is the one that has a bit of urgency for me, as you know, because I think the plan is extraordinary. I think people have taken notice. I think we've got a lot of people wanting to develop stuff along the riverfront. And even I've seen a lot of projects come to talk to us about this project or that project. And that worries me, because I feel like the pace of that is quicker than the pace of being able to ensure that we have a continuous access or boardwalk to the riverfront. So I personally think the way to address this right now is for City Council to pass a very simple piece of legislation that requires a minimum of some amount, 10 feet, but it is 10 or 12 feet along the river for any projects going forward to have a no-build zone. It's that simple. I don't think we need it to be spot rezoning. I don't think we need to actually have an overlay. I think it needs to be legislated in some very simple way that puts a teeth to every project we have that comes before us, that if they can't do it, they might be a way. But I think what we've seen over the last few years is that one project can kill the entire length of something, aka the East Bank of the Flats, that I'm still salty about. So that to me is the rest of the plan can shape it, but if we can legislate that, and think of that policy. Of course, people will be grandfathered in, but anybody coming new is going to have to set that outsiders. And I think that needs to happen like tomorrow, like tomorrow. So I'm gonna challenge you, this question is to you. To say like, can we work together to do that as soon as possible?
I think, yeah. I think that's a great point, and what I was thinking, comparable to how we do have setbacks and roads, is that it's really comparable from that setback. Sure, the precedent for that, but it's, I already wrote down a little bit, reach out to other members, especially council. PowerPoint.
So just to double down on that a little bit. So we passed, when we took this, I think it was 2016 maybe, we did the repairing setback, which is sort of a template for what Commissioner Curry is referring to. The problem with the repairing setback ordinance, we thought something understood, is that it allowed us to apply it citywide. We couldn't touch the federal navigation. So I'm wondering, I think it's a good recommendation, but the mechanics of it, you gotta figure that out. Because we're talking of various properties, having a blanket sort of requirement for certain setback, the federal navigable channel, making sure that we cross all those T's and dot all those I's. I think that's spot on, that you have to have an actual piece of legislation to get it done. So we need to make sure that we drill down on that point and make sure that there's no issues associated.
I mean, so I may get myself in trouble for saying this, but is that this is one where I don't think we need to wait to make sure we get it exactly right. Get it going, get it in place, and evolve it. Because it is that important to put something in place, very simple, that sends the right message, that has some teeth to it, and then we evolve it over time. The real problem is the quantity of projects that are being proposed right now that are coming are going to put generational gaps in this idea that I see. And so the urgency to just say that when you come before this commission or our city council, that is something we are legislating. That's to me could be the biggest sort of thing that could throw a wrench in this whole vision.
Thank you, Will. I was waiting for you to pull out the microphone. Glad you did, because watching would be upset. I kind of like Linda, because she likes infrastructure and bulkheading and all that kind of stuff, and it's hugely important. Misunderstood, looked at last, and those type of things. So when you talk about bulkheading, I think you also have to talk about dredging and what we do with the dredges, and it can't just be a port authority problem year after year. Where do we put this stuff? How do we design this in a way that this becomes part of the plan? What we're going to do as we move forward with dredging and stuff, because now you can have safe harbors and stuff. There's going to be an eddy behind there. You can have different kinds of dredging than you have today. And then the bulkheading, I think, could be a learning opportunity. We're going to lose engineers and people that do that kind of work as people doing it right now. And there's not that same kind of interest. We don't see that kind of same interest today that we did before. So maybe there's a diversity of bulkheading depending on where it is in the river and who touches that part of the bulkheading and that thing. So the court would think about that. I would also hope that partners, because there's a lot of partners here, would also think about what we can do with the dredging, how important that really is for kind of future expansion of our city. So I agree with you. It doesn't sound real sexy, but I remember when Bill Peacock first came to the clinic, and he was in charge of construction and everything. And I said, Bill, what's your biggest problem we got today? He says, well, we got the Heart Institute, we don't have enough power for it. It's being built. So, we should think about those kind of things. The other thing I would talk about and think about is kind of the funding for the geotech, the environmental, and the utilities. We're going to have
a lot of people talking to Lillian, obviously, developers that want to do things, and maybe there's the infrastructure and the stuff available. But some of these areas, you know, because of the geotech and the environmental and the utilities, there's going to be a gap. Putting that kind of stuff in place now, kind of like the Clean Ohio Fund was for a long, long time, will make it happen in a small amount of time. So I think we should think about those kind of things. And then when we talk about Lakeview Terrace and property that Jacobs, starting to try to knit those master plan. Jacobs already has a master. You know, starting to knit those things together are hugely, hugely. So I think we need to. I take notes and move them all around so I can look around. Get the full news. I think that's about it. Any other commission members? Okay, so questions from the public. Do we have things coming up on the screen? Who's doing that?
Anthony has some
Oh,
questions.
Anthony, come on up.
So I'm gonna take this moment of privilege to acknowledge the city planning staff, namely Anthony and Reese, who really helped organize this, and Michael put everything together. Because this is our first hybrid meeting. It's coming on well so far. So I want to just thank you guys, give you guys an honor.
All right,
Thank you, Director. Morning, Commission. So we have received a couple of public comments on our chat. We have not received any on our website currently or on the page. So we'll begin with the first question, which is from Elaine. And she says, thinking of the residents of Lakeview CMHA, likely that some are employed, some are underemployed, and some are unemployed. Can there be assistance to connect those interested with both the industrial and commercial hospitality employers in the flats for job and career opportunities for these residents?
that's a question. Who's going to answer that one? You know, I might want to say one thing. You know, CMHA, when they do a project, so when they do their project, they have car workers, and it's part of their contract that contractors work with car workers as part of their obligation. I wonder if there's an opportunity as we start doing things that are contiguous to CMHA, if there's car workers involved with that. Just a workforce.
Through the Workforce Investment Board, you know, the county city partnership, I know that so if historically companies that have received, you know, some sort of city loan or something have been obligated to use public resources to try to help, you know, marriage between job opportunities. Jobs like there is an existing infrastructure to build off of. It's not necessarily something that maybe the planning commission is often leads on, but I certainly think I'd be happy to think through the CMHA and the partners how I kind of make those connections, because it's a very valid point. There are a lot of jobs in close proximity to Terrace, and there will be more jobs in close proximity to Terrace, and it might just be helping to, you know, arrange that conversation and build off of that.
OHM is beginning the master planning process with CMHA for Lakeview Terrace, and we are working with them on combined engagement activities, which have a variety of components to them, including job fair activities. So we will bring that comment to them so that they give that input and see how that combined activity can continue to take place.
Yeah, I think it's really important because what happens is if you're a car worker, once your project is over, figure your job is over. And some of these car workers actually move on. We have a car worker that we work with all the time, and actually he's in business for himself now. And so I think it's really, really important that people that start doing car work don't think that their job is over after that. And so if we can kind of start bringing them out into the larger community, one, they'll find the river, which will be great. And number two, they'll have lifetime employment.
And I just want to say too, just with respect to the upcoming planning process, now there's precedent that has been set in the Buckeye Woodland neighborhood through the choice program that we just got $35 million for. And as Mark Fields on our team knows, who's a planner for that area, that planning study was not just about physical development. It was about job creation and all those other components. And I'm sure that as we go through this planning process with CMHA, that will also be a hallmark of this particular initiative. Not to mention, these studies can really serve as a conduit to making those connections and building those relationships necessary for individuals like Elaine to be able to engage with the business community around there that she may have not otherwise had the opportunity to connect with. So we can use that process as a tool for connecting people, for her to be engaged and even pose some of those questions directly to individuals who can actually do something needed.
You know, I forgot, Stami Paul's online. Stami, you got any questions? Which member?
She has not raised her hand.
Okay, Anthony,
Hold
go
on a
ahead.
second.
Okay, well, while we're waiting for Paul, so we did have one other comment from Mr. Douglas Page. He asks in relation to the bulk bidding, setback requirements and discussion. Should it be a no-build zone or a right of access zone? Must it meet certain criteria or certain requirements? Lake Geneva in Wisconsin has a public right of way around the entire lake crossing several communities.
I think they just said it in a different way.
Yeah, no, but
You're very confident.
all right, I guess I agree, that's what I think does need to be worked out, but in the first step of it, what I was trying to say is that first have to legislate the no build zone that will allow a setback of a no build zone that allows you then to think about the right way to address the continuity, if you will. So it's really to protect both the riverfront and the lakefront in terms of river's edge. It doesn't mean that you can't develop a boardwalk or something like that, but it doesn't allow private. What we need is something that doesn't allow you to prevent access from the river edge, fence it off, build right up to it. The old Flatsings Bank. So that's each individual property. You have to go through the restaurant to go out to the water. Right? And so that's the trick. But as I was describing to this point, I think the sense of urgency is not to try to take a year or two to get it exactly right, because I think all of the what is going to happen very quickly. This needs to be the message needs to be sent legislatively that this is something that people have to address. We can evolve it over time. That's the point I was making. And so I am going to likely, if I'm allowed to be part of the motion, I really am going to add this to our motion, which is to say that date certain within 1 to 2 meetings would like to have the staff of the commission come back to us with a proposal, a simple proposal that you would calculate, you may be able to start to socialize amongst council members to start the process. But I think it is something we should try to put on paper the simplest way possible and then start the negotiations amongst. Well, I'll wait till there's more comment, public comment.
Other? Yeah, so we have one other comment that just came in from Mr. Jim Ridge. He says, I'm excited to see the long range planning turning into tangible projects that improve Northeast Ohio's quality of life. Okay. And that is all we have.
Sammy not have any other comments?
She hasn't raised her hand yet.
She has it noted in the chat that she does not have any questions and that it's a very good presentation.
Well, motion, move to, motion for everything earlier just said. I'll move to approve this, adopt this plan. Adding that staff and council work together on a plan to preserve access directly along the waterfront, some sort of setback or other mechanism.
Got a second?
Second.
Okay, motion and second, further discussion.
I just want to say that it should be noted, it's been an extraordinary process, and really want to thank city planning staff and Metro Parks, and all the partners here, and Fast Forward and Fort, because the amount of collaboration that it took to do this through a pandemic should be noted, and to have this high level of community engagement with the process for something that, to be honest, is one of the most important things that we should be really working on as a community is this. So, so I just want to applaud everyone. It's a comment to the motion, but we have a motion in a second.
We have a motion and a second, further discussion. Michael, call the roll, please. Owen. Yes. Curry.
Yes.
Chris Scott.
Yes.
Paul. She hear us? Stammy.
Yes, she votes yes.
Slide.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you all for great presentation. It was very, very nice. Next thing we have to do is open up the restaurant. Is Switch gonna open?
Thank you.
Hopefully around Labor Day. Oh, all right, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Might I make a social commentary?
You can.
Keep over.
Sure.
Concerning the plan, just want to let everyone know, when you try and develop, when you engage in communities that are at risk or marginalized African American communities, the lift will always be heavy. It will cost more money, it's more intentional. You have to look at this as deferred maintenance. So let's not lose sight of that. But I have to live harder. Thank you.
Thank you. Townhouse code.
Mr. Carl Reese is going to be presenting the changes to the townhouse code as discussed at the Townhouse Planning Commission meeting. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Carl Reese.
Yeah, no, thank you. So this was here, the last planning commission meeting. There were some additional changes that were requested by the commission, and so under the staff and I worked together to accommodate those and make these decisions. So should be acceptable to the commission. Next slide. So these are the goals of the update, clarifying the language and definitions based on user feedback, new definitions, regulations for the audit boards. We talked a lot about that. The new ones that we're adding is we're going to add a definition and regulations for used units. And we're going to revise the interior frontage distance. Those are the two things we talked about the last meeting. And then we went into pretty great detail the last meeting about finding the use of single feedback. Not going to hit those things, we're just going to talk about. So this is the plan, the townhouse project that I think the commission members really wanted us to look at and figure out how to address the cases or something similar to it were to be proposed again. I did want to show you guys the final plan that was adopted for this. The setback for the used units, which is the southern property line there, did end up being 15 feet. And 2 units to the west were moved. So the connections all the way around the same did get better as a result of this review. But we are going to add this new definition of used units. So it's any townhouse unit whose primary pedestrian entrance fronts a flooding interior side of the yard and is located opposite. There's 2 conditions that have to be met for it to be a used unit in that instance. So we're looking at those southern units. Their garage is on the auto court, and the front door is opposite it on the use itself. And the second condition, so this is a separate condition, so it's for buildings that have a shared front yard line. So that's the distance between the 2 front doors if you have a farm we needed to make sure that when we changed the metrics in here, that we didn't end up with those units that are just able to be, their doors 6 feet apart. So, how they should. So we added this to the front yard depth. So now we have principal, secondary, and interior frontage, which now is only for alleys, essentially. And now we have views. So views units, the front yard setback is a minimum of 10 feet. So that's what the interior frontage used to be, is now views unit, and it's minimum. So again, going back to the definition here, so the three things that I thought were most important to point out when we're making this change. So no townhouse to be located closer than 10 feet to an interior property line if it has a pedestrian entrance fronting that property line. So that's the new use 10-foot setback. So in this instance, which is Battery Park, the setback here is probably 7 feet or so. That new minimum is going to be 10. So no townhouse to be located closer than 7 feet to an interior property line unless it is street facing. So this is over at Bridge and 58. The rear yard setback here is about 5 feet. We're increasing that to 7 feet. When you add the 3-foot minimum side yard setback for the house next door, you get a minimum of 10 feet. And the last one here, the minimum distance between townhouses that share a front yard is now going to be 20 feet. So each one has to have a 10-foot setback. Minimum, the closest of those two units to get together, the minimum size of that. And the entrances. So this was the other thing that Mr. Curry wanted us to address. Go to the next slide, Maurice. So the condition here was that there was just a lot of building without the gaps. And if these units on the southern edge, well, all of them, but the southern edge do not have doors on the auto port. Go back, slide, Maurice, please. So now each unit in a townhouse building with more than 3 shared walls, 4 units, has to provide 2 ground floor.
In the here, they have.
So that creates the distance. So that creates.
That's
Microphone, please. Go
so,
online, can't hear you.
so I would argue that this plan, which I don't like, would still qualify with what you wrote, because they created their own loophole by blocking like 4 and 3 and 3 and 3, so they wouldn't be required to have the man door. But it's the distance that that a visitor would have to come along the tracks that entire length that really worries me. Do you understand what I'm saying? So in this scenario, I would want man doors on the, so can we just tweak it to say an and to that, which is whatever that is, 100 feet along the tracks is what worries me more than the fact that they broke it up, right?
Well, no, the other thing. So, if you look at some of the cuts in between.
Yeah.
Person's not walking, they're not walking across so much grass and bushes. But then you have some cuts in there that actually have sidewalk. There's pedestrian access, maybe it's okay. There's no pedestrian access, just green space, it's not okay. So then they have to do the.
I'm just saying, this one, no, it doesn't actually, because in this one, for me, the real issue is like, I really would want man doors. So is there a way you can tweak it to say, with this scenario, this length along the tracks, if I'm coming to visit, I want to be able to park somewhere in Wade Park, right? And Google it, also I want to be able to put the address in my Google, and it takes me here and I know where the front door is. The problem with that is the Google thing is going to take you to the view. And I think it's just a dangerous situation, right? So yes, people could wind through there and find their way to the back door, which is the front door, which is really the back door. And in this scenario, I'd rather if there was a man door, so when they park on Wade Park and walk, they enter through the garage door, right? Or the man door there. So And I know there's a lot more, this was the second one in Ohio City that did the exact same thing, remember? And they broke up the units, so it would be like they would be a loophole in this.
Maybe it's total distance, so anything over,
It's total distance.
yeah, anything over 50 feet, you have to.
But if you go back to the legislation, I would leave it the way you had it, but add advance, so go back to the language. Like how you feel. So you said each unit of more than 3 units and or a length of X. That, you know, of the muse is of length X distance, so that means with 100 feet, right? I mean, yeah. You tell us, is it 25 feet, is it 40 feet, is it 50 feet? At some point, it's too much, and you need to have a man door. Is it 75 feet, like what is that? Also, length of that makes it necessary to have a man door. So I don't know what the length is. I'm gonna check that of the. If you look at the Glenville one for me, it's probably half that length, right?
That's almost 500.
Yeah, so like half that, like sort of 4, maybe 6 units, we would probably feel okay.
Yeah, I agree with Luann, and I live in Beacon Place. Last 4 units that were built at Beacon Place, which is adjacent to Church Square, I live in Union. What the developer and the architect did creatively, although we don't have a door, it's a garage door, they created a courtyard. It's a design thing, and there's a gate, which is nice because for my brother, he's the only one who does it. He'll pull in the back of my garage, he'll come through the gate, and there's a doorbell, he'll ring it, and he's in my house. It's just an access thing, and it works really well. I think there's some other creative ways to do this. So to Lillian's point, I think we need to write it in there and give those guys the creative way to solve it. But I think it needs to be some sort of pedestrian access.
I mean, let's do it now because it's fantastic that here that you're leaving.
That's already you are.
Yeah. So like congratulations, by the way, but like. Congratulations, but like I just want to get this done today. So you're so close, but sorry. So I didn't say where or why, but can you add just right now today? Can we say
150
feet.
feet.
X units and 150 feet, and that'll give us the flexibility if someone's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter.
Right.
Make sense?
It does make sense. We will need to refine the definition of muse. But that definition is actually what's going to be. Because defining what the muse is going to be when we start regulating. So
Muse to me is one that doesn't have a front door, right? That has this issue. So.
yeah, but this condition also applies to if you have an arms building. So it.
Go to the next one. Back to the language. I'd rather get it wrong for getting it. So I would say their commission's okay with it. No more than their walls. And or a muse of the length of. And that'll give us at least the authority to travel. No, I lost last time.
I really think that we need to, if it's okay with the commission, to give us the option to fix it in either this provision or in the definition.
But when will that get done?
I'm worried about unintended consequences. Worried about because we thought we had this right. We've been working on it the last 3 weeks. We wake up in the middle of the night and think, no, that's wrong.
Yeah.
So I don't want that to happen.
Well, Kyle, I'm sorry to cut you off. Do you understand what we're trying to advocate for?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you could do approval with the state of that.
I think we should do this.
Okay.
Because this is more protective than it is harmful. This will actually make less density. What I'm just advocating for course, a little bit less. But still allowed.
Then you can look at
Then we'll fix it from wherever you are.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Go on.
I think that's the end of it. Yeah, so those are the two things.
But-
And the last thing I think the commission asked us to talk about the signage, after Collier publishes.
Oh, Kyle, I just want to say thank you. You captured, the lens I think we're trying to apply.
Wait, what was the last thing? Idea.
Yeah, signage for public notice.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, there was some discussion around some of the public notice piece. There were some examples shared with respect to yard signs and other types of signage that could go out into the neighborhood to inform people about when there is a case. Similar to what we do with respect to zoning.
Brownfields. Good with brownfield.
Right. That could be done. I just think that you have to be open to the fact that when you have that, a lot of more, I don't want to say it. It kind of opens up a lot more need for capacity. I will say that. You have to physically get your stuff out into the neighborhood if you go the signage route. And when we put out public notices for zoning, typically it's for people who are directly impacted. So part of what we need to figure out how we need to manage, Commissioner Curry and everyone, is when you do it for this, it's probably going to be more community-wide when people see it. So it's going to open it up, and I hate to use this term, but I will, Pandora's box with respect to that level of engagement. We're all for engagement, but we just need to be mindful of what that response will be. It will be much different than when we put out information and fixed geography for fixed properties for a zoning change. It'll be a much larger catchment area if we put signage for the community. But I just want to say it's something that we're open to because there's nothing to hide with the work that we do. But just note that it will be something that's going to be something we'll have to manage. So that's what we're extra. Yes.
Members? Questions? Yeah.
Okay. I move to. Sorry. I move to accept the amended changes as discussed by Mr. Reese. Caveat that he provides vision in the use section that addresses length and pedestrian access.
I would say, just some clarification, did we table this last time? So I just want to make sure that we,
Doesn't say.
that we, move the table, so move that, we actually need to approve the whole thing
Yes.
with these additions.
Yes. Thank you for that.
I'll do.
Well,
Yeah, that's okay.
start over, sir.
Yeah, start over.
Move to remove townhouse code rewrite table.
Second. Okay.
Michael, call the roll, please. Owen. Yes. Luker.
Yes.
Curry. Scott.
Yes.
Paul. Paul.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries.
Try this again. I move to approve rewrite of the townhouse code as presented the last few meetings, with the caveat that under the new section, provisions be added concerning pedestrian access and live in distance to that access.
I will second. I would say that very specifically, if August is okay, that the sentence can be and or like the 150 feet.
Yes.
So you have some guidance? I second.
Further discussion? Thank you, Stanley.
Yeah.
Michael, call the roll, please. Bowen. Yes. Hooper.
Yes.
Curry.
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
Just on the internet. Stanley, can you hear us? Can you say something?
Stanley.
Oh, she's muted again. Yes.
Yes. Can you hear me? Sorry.
There we go.
Yes.
Motion carries. Unbelievable job. Thank you.
That's great.
What can we do to keep you
Are we adjourned?
The rest of support, record support.
Okay, Lillian's still on tender, but it's all good. It's all good. So, yeah, Kyle Reese is, moving on from the Cleveland Planning Commission. I do want to say, Kyle, when he first came on, he was a part of the motley crew of millennials, that really fueled a lot of the energy in our department. Had, a lot of success here, guys, over the last decade. And I think that, Kyle, our entire team, bring our heart and soul to this work. Kyle's passion for zoning and planning is unmatched with respect to his knowledge about the zoning code and where cities need to go with respect to regulations. Really blessed to have him and realize everything that expertise to really advance form-based zoning, which you're hearing about soon. We're close to the product. So I'm really excited about that. And the townhouse code, some of the other changes required Commissioner Curry culture change. And you know how painful culture change can be when you're trying to change the system, dealing with electeds and even the administration, and trying to get people to understand where you're going. People in the neighborhoods. So there's a lot of that. So I said to Kyle and I say to all of our staff, we transition. Fortunately, they move on within the region and see ourselves as being infectious, spreading this ideology to the entire northeast of our region. We have Donna's Jen, we have Trevor Hunt doing his thing. We all keep in touch and we all share value proposition. I think we're going to keep pushing that as much. Kyle has been awesome. He's going to do great things where he's going. I think when you come to city planning, you can really use this very well. If you can survive in 601 Lakeside, you're conditioned to work anywhere. So we're confident that it'll be fun.
I'm gonna be the new city manager.
Oh,
Never had it before, so
excellent.
I think if they want any more of our planners, we should annex them into the city of Cleveland.
You know what I can
That's
also
regional.
offer, Kyle? Be fierce, be brave, always challenge. That's what it's about. That's what keeps things going. That's what causes innovation to happen. You've done that for us, so good luck, bro.
We've been hard. Apologize. Where we are.
You do it in a beautiful way. So, you missed it. We had a meeting with the AIA and after we were speaking to everyone in professional manner. And just got through it. I think everyone understood where it was. Did it beautifully.
Their pressure, cultural issue. And condition is important for all of us. So we thank the commission for also challenging every staff with the pressure and push. I think we're doing great stuff. All things come to an end. Yeah, we're thinking beyond ourselves and with the legacy as a main thing. Okay, all right. One last thing. We're making pretty good time. This will be brief. I know that certain commissioners wanted to understand where we're going with this whole tree preservation piece and understanding the process. So I have a brief set of slides I'm going to go through with you just to get sort of a high level of the process. And I know August, you've always been bullish about how does it work, what's the process, what is it going to mean. So
We should bring Freddie Geist back for this.
So what this is this is the permit intake process from in and there. When a development interest comes in, it goes through building and housing, they go through one of these 3 tracks. Okay, and this is our process when building and housing hands off the permit application to us. They either go through the landmarks commission, if it's a landmark property, or if it's a landmarks district, housing design review, if it's housing, and also any new development project that's built also gets reviewed through city planning. There's 3 tracks. You are familiar with the algorithm. Where it comes to staff, goes through a local committee, housing design review that's in-house, it's not external to the neighborhood. And then there is approval by the planning commission, and then sign off by the director in Blackfoot Building and Housing. For very minor projects, I have the autonomy to sign off on those, but still have to report my action to you guys given the agenda. Slide numbers. Now, one of the things that this does, and I think part of council, I'm glad Mr. Slack is here. The good thing about Charles is that he sees both sides of the house. Oftentimes, folks on the council side, they don't understand what it takes to get from point A to point B. And the administrative nuances associated with that. Like you working in the administration, it's really like the rigor that it takes to put together an administrative process to respond to a goal that the council may want is work. And proof of that as well. So when we see the tree preservation piece, it adds another layer to that development process. So it adds another leg. And that next leg was reviewed by the Public Works Division under the tree preservation folks, Jennifer Kidd, who's our arborist. So when that permit application goes to building and housing, and would normally get routed to us, it also has to be routed simultaneously to them to do that review. You do not have the expertise that they're going to review the tree canopy requirements and things of that nature. But we do make sure that we have to take their position into account. If they deny a plan because of issues with trees, that could actually hold the process. I want to be very clear about that. And this is why we've been very careful about that, because August, as an individual who's seen things come through the process and having to deal with existing hurdles, you add another layer to that, that's a very real thing for developers. But we also know that tree canopy and tree preservation is also very important. So this is pretty much the process, how it work. So submission of a tree preservation plan is made to building and housing with their application. Okay, so they have to submit that. As part of the intake process, the building and housing notifies city planning and urban forestry that an application requires a tree preservation plan. Checklists will be provided to applicants that contain the submittal requirements. Just like they have development submittal requirements, there's submittal requirements that they need to review that tree preservation plan. Now, Acela is the vehicle that's our digital platform that allows us to interface with building and housing. So Acela will be the vehicle that will be used to share the plans with the urban forestry and planning divisions. So it'll come to us, it'll go to the urban forestry folks, and then the tree canopy plan is reviewed by urban forestry and city planning. We need to have a pulse on that because recommendations that they make could impact the actual design of the plan. And that's where that nexus is. So there still has to be that communication with them. So urban forestry will outreach the applicant to obtain a tree preservation plan and begin review and comment on the proposed proposed tree preservation plan, route their recommendations in writing to the applicant and city plan, so that we know what their expertise is with respect to their recommendations for the project. City planning will review recommendations with the applicant and urban forestry for changes to the site plan or the landscaping plan to accommodate requirements of the tree preservation ordinance during the schematic approval phase. And then applicant will review and respond to comments. Just like design review, it's an exchange. Right? So there's a recommendation, there's a response. The applicant will route a written response to urban forestry and city planning regarding the modifications. City planning and urban forestry will approve or deny based on the response from the applicant. Then there's the determination to approve or deny. If the applicant is denied, the applicant will have the right to appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals, just like they would in any other case, to request relief from the requirements of the ordinance. If the applicant's proposal is approved, they will be able to proceed to permit application to sign off by urban forestry. They have to put their signature on that. So if you go back to the beginning, and you look at our current algorithm, it's like the applicant now has another track they're going to have. All right, so that's the unintended consequences of that desire to want to ensure institutionalizes. Right, because we have to always suffer on the back end because you're going to have someone upset about having to go through that process. But we have to be very confident. And this almost goes back to what Mr. Curry was saying. If we value X, then you got to be committed to doing it. And it's going to be some accountability on the part of the person making the investment. You got to understand.
I think this is great. It's not anecdotal though. It's not, it's not someone trying to play an arborist, and so it's a process. I think the outcome should, the result being the outcome.
That's right. And again, a lot of what we're doing, speaking of innovation, we're doing testing. With the form-based zoning code, there's 3 geographies. You have to make sure the efficacy of this is right because there's going to be a legacy of that as a result. And if you don't want to be that commission, I don't want to be that guy. I doesn't want to be that guy. Leave a legacy or a residue of problems. So I think it's necessary. And that's why I say we appreciate Mr. Curry and others challenging having the back and forth. So we welcome that. So,
Well, and I like the idea that the arborist is going to look at it because a lot of people are going to say, "Oh, I'm saving a tree," and then they cut half the roots, and then it doesn't die. It doesn't tip over in a day.
right.
3 years it has a disease and it doesn't. Oh, I got a disease. Yeah, because you cut off its roots, like cutting off a person's legs.
And in the department, we know what we don't know. We don't pretend to know things. So the arborist will be the point.
One of the questions that, we talked about a long time ago, we were talking about trees and stuff, and thank goodness you guys did the tree survey and everything, which shows us that we've been on the wrong track and built a bunch of trees in our city. As we do developments, and let's say one comes in front, the arborist says, yeah, they're going to take down all these trees. And maybe it's not appropriate to have all those trees because of the type of development it is. It would be great that, they would have to buy into the tree bank. And then where those trees are appropriate, I'm not talking about trees that look like this. Half the time you go out there and they spend $10,000 on a dozen trees that look like this. 6-inch caliber trees, things like that. Important thing. But if we had a tree bank that people could buy into, kind of like buying a what? They do that. They do.
Director, could we get copies of those first 2 slides? Okay, thank you.
But so, how do we do that? Get that tree bank going.
That's going to take some work, obviously. But
is that something council has to do?
Well, that's something that was discussed years ago.
I know, when Freddie was here.
Like having the trees, but having a process in place whereby a development access that tree bank and solve all that stuff.
Or give into the tree bank, or give into it.
Go ahead.
Mike.
Yeah.
Just first of all, thank you because this has been something that I also asked for, seeing a lot of new development. We all support density, but it's just a spatial mismatch. Dense development and then the real estate needed for large trees. And I could even say, kind of among council members joke about like, what's a day in the life of a councilman? Trees, everything comes back to trees. And even in parts of the city like the one I represent, I think in decades past, we were so eager to become the forest city that we were planting trees that ended up getting a 5-foot diameter and a 4-foot tree lawn. And to the city's credit, we're doing much better now about thinking through how we have the tree canopy of the future. But the reality is that we don't necessarily have the space in a dense urban environment on public property to create in many places what we're losing. I think that it really is the purview of this committee, I think, to keep this in the trees in the back of our mind and to work more collaboratively with urban forestry. The only reason I'm reluctant to kind of mandate, a sustaining agenda item is I think that division right now is under-resourced, doesn't have the technology that it needs in place to be able to do its job most effectively, and then I worry about the impact of trying to put something else on their list. I will say that this does underscore my continued belief in the need for a functioning tree commission that works in tandem with city planning. But I guess the charge to my colleagues in the planning commission would be, as we're seeing these new developments, to just keep tree canopy in the back of our mind and to not be afraid to maybe table something sometime because we need to have outreach over the street and make sure that there's some force for the trees. Yeah, then I'll pass out bombs.
This is a really interesting conversation because it goes back to vision for the battle. That's right. Have some sort of infrastructure in place. I'm coming from a private industry. I know it's hard. It's easier for us to go out and find that and build that capacity. In the public sector, it's a lot harder. I understand, but if urban forestry is undermanned or then solve the problem. I think they should be the review entity. They know more. It's a science. Not me having an opinion about an old tree that might be diseased and ready to fall over versus someone who has an opinion. So that's just my opinion.
I totally agree.
She lost power.
First cut you off.
It's
Are we still on?
Yes, we are.
testing. Testing. Okay. Yeah. So I think August is right. It's a technical exercise. And you have to have an arborist to make those determinations. Now, we can look at a site plan and say that, it would be great if you had tree cover, covering this side of the property or whatever the case may be. But the survivability of trees, type, the quality. I learned about root flare and the importance of that. Right? A lot of our sidewalks are walking right now because some trees were planted when you have root flare that actually gets some of the
Those are the ones that are feeding the tree snap. Yeah, those are the things feeding the tree snap. So what happens is when you first plant a tree, the stickers go down first. And then as they grow up, that's where you get the root flare. But the ones in the top foot are the ones that actually feed the tree from there on out. And they keep it from tipping over and stuff like that. So people forget about that. And then they cut through and they go, why did my tree down?
So I want to keep you guys on time. This last slide just basically outlines what the tree preservation, what it is. This is shared with the development interest and also what is a tree preservation plan required. This is something that we want to make sure that we pay attention to. So it's for any development project that meets the criteria of COC section 2 as a development project situated on 1 or more acres of land and any apartment, townhouse, or condominium project of 4 or more units situated on any size parcel of land. The evaluation should occur on any of those types of projects. And just keep in mind, like I said before, the tree preservation plan must be approved by the city or made its properties to the enforcement section of the permits issued. So that's teeth. And it's good in many ways, but it'd be scary for some who are concerned about process. So we know that this is the world we live in. So, all right, so I want to give you guys an update. You have access to the presentation. We can get that out to everyone just so you have it. We also have the actual ordinance that you guys can take a look at. And I think are all set. Mr. Williams?
Are we done?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I think this was a successful hybrid meeting.
Yes.